Zani will clobber the enemy into the grave, and in this video I'm going to tell you how she works, how to build her, and in what teams to play her. Let's begin, starting with how her kit works. Her basic attacks are fairly regular. She does have an extra basic attack after her third one if you time the input correctly. However, in regular gameplay, you are not going to make use of this, so while I am mentioning it, it's not at all relevant. Then for her skill. When it is not enhanced, Zani will just deal a little bit of spectro damage and sit there. You can either cancel the skill early, which will still give you the Forte, however it will do no damage, or you can wait for an enemy to attack. If an enemy attacks, the damage of this attack will be reduced by 100%, and Zani will stagnate nearby enemies, and then do a bit of spectro damage. She will also reduce their vibration by 5%. If Zani has maximum Forte and is not in her ult state, her skill will be replaced. This skill works the exact same way as the unenhanced skill, except it just does more damage, and cancelling the skill will still do damage instead of doing no damage at all. After the enhanced skill is used, Zani will gain the Sunburst effect, which will give her 20% damage amplification to Spectrofrazzle. Zani's liberation is pretty simple. First off, it will just do a little bit of spectro damage and make Zani enter the Inferno mode. It also increases the maximum amount of blaze Zani can have, which is one of her Forte bars, and she will also additionally gain extra 50 blaze. When in Inferno mode, the damage multiplier of Zani's basic attacks are enhanced by 25%, however in regular combat you're not going to notice this much. Zani also has an ult finisher called the Last Stand. When in Inferno mode, and blaze becomes less than 30, Zani's Resonance Liberation will become the Last Stand, doing a large chunk of spectro damage and ending Inferno mode. Now it's time to get into Zani's Forte circuit, it's a lot of words, but trust me, I'll make it make sense. First off is Zani's Forte bars, one of which is Redundant Energy, aka the one that is used for Zani's enhanced skill. She can hold up to 100. And it's generated by using normal attacks, intro skill, or resonance skill. Zani cannot obtain redundant energy when she is in Inferno mode, and this redundant energy can be used to enhance her resonance skill. Next up there is Blaze. Usually Blaze is capped at 100, but in Inferno mode it's capped at 150. Using Zani's enhanced skill will give 10 Blaze, and whenever a Spectrofrazzle stack is applied, Zani will gain 5 Blaze. And casting Resonance Liberation will also give Zani 50 Blaze. This Blaze is used for Zani's enhanced heavy attacks that I'm going to get into in a second. First off, I want to talk about Heliacal Ember. Heliacal Ember is a special kind of debuff that Zani applies to enemies. Instead of Spectrofrazzle, Zani will convert all Spectrofrazzles into Heliacal Embers, which will instantly deal the Spectrofrazzle's corresponding damage. And like I said before, whenever Spectrofrazzle is converted into Heliacal Ember, Zani will gain Blaze. Heliacal Ember lasts for 6 seconds per stack, and is capped as 60 stacks. Zani is also capable of triggering the Eternal Radiance set by applying Heliacal Embers with her enhanced skill. And now finally, I get to the most important part of Zani's Forte circuit, which is her enhanced heavy attacks. When Zani is in Inferno mode, she gains access to Heavy/Daybreak, Heavy/Dawning, and Heavy/Nightfall, as well as Heavy/Light Smash. Try saying that 3 times fast. All of these attacks count as both heavy attack damage and Spectrofrazzle damage at the same time. Whenever Blaze is higher than 30, Zani's basic attacks and resonance skill are replaced with these heavy attacks. The basic attacks become a free hit string, going from Daybreak to Dawning to Nightfall, and Nightfall will consume an extra amount of Blaze to enhance its damage. And whenever you use resonance skill, you will again, much like your other skills, enter a parry stance. And after she is finished holding that parry stance, she will immediately use Nightfall, and again consume a certain amount of Blaze to enhance its damage. As for Heavy/Light Smash, that is going to be what replaces your dodge counter. However, you're only going to get Light Smash, assuming that your next basic attack would not have been Nightfall. So basically, if you got lost during that, here's a TLDR. Basic attacks and skill become heavy and Spectrofrazzle damage at the same time, and will consume Forte whenever they're cast. Got it? Okay, moving on. Zani's intro skill will just do a bit of spectro damage as well as recovering redundant energy for her enhanced skill. And then Zani's outro skill will deal spectro damage based on the amount of Heliacal Embers on the enemies at the current moment. And after that, Enemies with heliacal embers will have spectro damage that is dealt to them amplified by 20%. Zani is not capable of benefiting off of her own Ultra skill, so this will mainly be here to buff teammates like Shorekeeper and Phoebe. Now for Zani's inherent skills. Casting Intro skill will give Zani 12% spectro damage bonus, and for the second inherent skill, when in the ready stance, which is when you are trying to parry, all damage taken is reduced by 40%. Very simple. Now, for Zani's talent priority, it is by far going to be her Forte circuit first. This is by far most of her damage output, so try leveling this as much as possible. Next up would be Zani's Resonance Liberation. It's not that impressive in terms of her damage output, so you can leave it at like level 8 or maybe level 6 if you're strapped for resources, but I would level it eventually. I would also still level up her Resonance skill, because their enhanced skill counts as Spectrofrazzle damage, which will be enhanced by your teammates. I would try to ignore her basic attacks and intro skill, however. With that lengthy explanation out of the way, it's time to see what weapon we should be equipping on Zani. With the first choice obviously being her signature weapon, Blazing Justice. It will give a high base attack with crit damage, as well as giving attack percent in the passive. Additionally, whenever you cast a basic attack, you'll be able to ignore 8% of enemy defense, and you will gain 50% Spectrofrazzle amplification. This is very useful, as Zani's heavy attacks in her Inferno mode count as Spectrofrazzle damage, so this is by far going to be Zani's best weapon. Next up is the Tragic Comedy. Her heavy attacks do still count as heavy attack damage. However, this weapon requires you to either cast intro skill or cast basic attacks, which means that for all the Nightfall heavy attacks that you trigger with your Resonance skill, you will not be able to get the 48% heavy attack damage. However, on the ones that are just used by pressing your basic attack, you will be able to get that bonus. Next up is Abyss Searches. It has a high amount of attack, but the main value here is just the energy regen it gives. It's almost perfect for allowing Zani to reach her energy regen requirements, meaning you don't need any energy regen rolls. However, if you already have the energy regen rolls on your echoes, it does drop in performance. There's also Shangliao's signature, the Verity's Handle. It just has a good base attack, good crit, but unfortunately it gives Resonance Liberation damage bonus, and Zani's Resonance Liberations are not at all the largest part of her damage output, so while it is better than any 4-star option, Verity's Handle is the worst 5-star. And if you're looking for an F2P option, the best bet is going to be the Craftable Gauntlets, the Legend of the Drunken Hero. They will give attack whenever you hit enemies affected by a negative status, which is what Zani's Heliacal Embers are. So at max stacks, this is going to be the best 4-star weapon for Zani. Blazing Justice, as you can see, is obviously Zani's signature weapon, and it is the best one. That's just to be expected. However, the other 5-star options are not horrible, and will still be able to get the job done whenever you're trying to play your Zani. Obviously, wuwa's signature weapons are just a big increase, but don't let that fool you. If you have Tragic Comedy or Abyss Surges, you'll be completely fine. Now let's move on to Zani's Echo sets. The best set to use is obviously the 5-piece Eternal Radiance, giving Spectro damage on the 2-piece, along with additional Spectro damage whenever you attack enemies with 10 stacks of Spectrofrazzle, or Heliacal Embers in this case. It will also give 20% crit rate after you apply Spectrofrazzle, or again Heliacal Embers in this case. Zani is capable of using this set completely fine, and it will be her best set, and you should aim to farm for this for your Zani. The best echo to use in the primary slot is Capitanea's for the 12% Spectro damage bonus and the 12% heavy attack damage bonus. However, if you do not have a good Capitanea's, Nightmare Morning Ix is not that far off, as you can see here. Additionally, you could also go for a 5-piece Celestial Light using the regular Morning Ix. It just gives a bunch of Spectro damage bonus, which is still going to be good for Zani. However, it is not going to be as good as Eternal Radiance's buffs. So if you can afford to, definitely do try to farm for Eternal Radiance. If you have literally nothing else, Lingering Tunes does exist, but it is a massive drop in damage. The drop in damage is higher than going from Zani's signature to Verity's Handle, so do try to farm for one of the Spectro sets. For main stats, you're going to want to go crit damage on your 4 cost, damage percent on your 3 costs, and attack on your 1 costs. You are able to use attack percent on your 3 costs, however it is better to just stick with damage bonus, as Zani's weapon does not give any damage bonus, and thus you do not suffer from diminishing returns. For your energy regen, you want around 115% for safety. If we assume a completely perfect loop in your abilities, you will be able to suffice with about 112%. However, I recommend 115% just in case something goes wrong, you know? So now that you have your Zani completely built, it's time to look for some teammates for her. And sadly, this is going to be a short section. The best team for Zani is obviously going to be with Phoebe and Shorekeeper. Most of Zani's relevant damage counts as Spectrofrazzle, and when we talk about Spectrofrazzle buffing, no one is as good as Phoebe is. Phoebe is by far the best Spectrofrazzle buffer in the entire game, and thus, running Zani without Phoebe is going to be a large decrease from if you ran her with Phoebe. So be sure to try and pick up a Phoebe since they are running at the same time if you don't have her yet. And then for the final slot, well, Shorekeeper is Shorekeeper. Are we just surprised that she's here? Verena will also work, but Shorekeeper is better. Is anyone surprised? Phoebe is replaceable with Shakona, who's coming in the second half. Shakona is able to apply just as much Spectrofrazzle as Phoebe is, if not more. However, one thing I will like to say is that you do lose out on Phoebe's massive buffing. So Shakona is by no means going to get you back up to the level of a Phoebe, but it is still good enough if you just want to play your Zani and don't care about damage output. If you're looking for a completely free-to-play team, you are also capable of running Mortefi for his heavy attack damage amplification and static mist, as well as Spectral Rover for Spectrofrazzle application. Again, it is going to be a very large decrease when comparing it to Phoebe, but it's still playable and will still clear tower, assuming you have enough investment on your characters and you know what you're doing. So again, I strongly advise picking up Phoebe before you pick up Zani, because Phoebe is just so integral to Zani's teams. But if you don't have Phoebe and don't want Phoebe, you are able to run Mortefi and Spectra Rover. Just know that you are going to be losing out on a lot of damage. And now finally, we have arrived at the sequence section for the biggest fans of Zani. Zani's first sequence will give her 50% Spectra damage bonus after using her enhanced skill, and will also make her immune to interruption when casting Heavy/Nightfall. This is one of the best S1s in the game, given that 50% Spectra damage bonus is an incredibly powerful buff, with an easy proccing condition. Definitely worth going for if you like Zani and you have the corals. Her S2 will give Zani 20% extra crit rate, and will increase the damage multiplier of Zani's enhanced skill by 80%. I don't think this is a very good sequence, but it is definitely a decent damage upgrade. If you have the corals to get it and you really like Zani, go for it. But if you don't really like Zani, I'd say skip out on this one. The third sequence will make it so whenever in Inferno mode, for every blaze consumed within Resonance Liberation, the damage multiplier of the finisher is increased by 8% to a maximum of 1200%. This will basically double the damage of the finisher, but the finisher wasn't doing that much anyway, so while it is pretty decent, it's not that good. Sequence 4 will increase the attack of all resonators in the team by 20% for 30 seconds after Zani uses her intro skill. This is pretty decent, pretty okay, but again, I would only go for this on the road to S6. For Sequence 5, the damage multiplier of the initial hit of the Liberation is increased by 120%. Again, this is really not that much of a damage increase, so just like S4, this is just on the road to S6. And then for the final sequence, the damage multipliers of all of Zani's heavy slashes will be increased by 40%. And whenever in Inferno mode, Zani will instantly recover 70 Blaze when she goes below 70, and additionally, within 8 seconds after entering Inferno mode, Zani will remain standing with at least 1 HP if hit by a fatal blow. So that means she's essentially unkillable for 8 seconds. Thanks to the extra Blaze that you get from Zani's S6, you are able to keep your rotation going for even longer. The buffs you gain from Phoebe and Shorekeeper last for a long time, so this is very doable, and is not at all a bad idea. So as usual, this is a really good S6. That's the end of my Zani guide, so if you learned anything new, let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Also, if you have any questions, while you can ask in the comments, a better place to reach me would be through my Discord server, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask your question in there, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond. But that'll be it from me. Peace.